Hello, hello, hello again. My name is Sharpie, and welcome back to Game Developers of Color Expo 2020. You are watching a fantastic stream, and we thank you so much for being here. Thank you very much as well to all of our fantastic sponsors for making this possible, specifically Subset Game, Riot Games, Valve Software, Insomniac Games, Electronic Gaming, and Prime Gaming. You guys have made this all fantastically possible, and we thank you so much for it. But enough about our sponsors. You guys are here for some amazing content, and we have some for you. I have with me one of the fantastic founders, designers, and developers of Onsen Master, the newest casual arcade indie game on the market, Derrick Fields. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Derrick.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Why don't you go ahead and describe the game a little bit for us, if you could?
Sure. So Onsen Master is a bathhouse strategy game about healing. It takes place on the fantasy island of Izajima, and you play as a character by the name of Mu, who is traveling to different onsen and healing customer ailments and kind of taking care of the various villagers.
That's amazing. I believe we also have a trailer here. Why don't we go ahead and just roll that real quick and take a look?
Right on.
First of all, let me just say, this game is adorable. Of all the games here, I had a very short list of games that I was super excited to cover and speak to developers, and your game was on that list just
Thanks
immediately because of the aesthetic. Now, I know that you were a part of the board members of the Japanese Art Foundation in Chicago, Illinois. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that affected the creation of this game and how that helped you kind of get to this stage of the game development process as far as is concerned?
Yeah, a lot of my work at the Japanese Arts Foundation usually revolves around education. Before quarantine, I was teaching how to draw anime classes at the center to people of all ages. And so a lot of Onsen Master's influence primarily deals with kind of the anime aesthetic, as well as a lot of lore that you usually find in Japanese mythology, specifically yokai, which are spirits that kind of take different forms and different shapes. And you'll see a lot of those visiting the onsen as well.
That's amazing. So I did see, of course, the yokai and monsters, as I believe the basic translation to English is, as you stated earlier. Is that correct? Yokai to monsters?
Yeah, it takes a few names. So monsters, spirits, a little bit more, not so much demons, but usually kind of a spiritual embodiment of the inanimate, the intangible, things like that.
Mm-hmm. How do the yokai actually affect the game process? I saw that inside of the trailer, we actually saw one of the yokai there talking to Mu, I believe the main character of the game, but I'm interested in how they actually interact in general and what their mechanic features are.
Yeah. So apart from your normal customers who just enter your onsen having kind of a standard ailment, maybe some sort of ingredient that they might need, yokai come with a few other features that might help, or I shouldn't say help, but they might disrupt your normal play experience. And so one of them that you saw in the trailer was a kappa who are associated with water. And so this one was spilling a lot of water around the bathhouse if you don't take care of them soon enough. That's one example where we have a couple other ones that will do other things, also in part with the level and the layout that's designed.
That's amazing. I feel like I should also take a small step back very quickly because there is a large question on my mind. Who is Mu? I see them as the main character of the game. I see yokai interacting with them. I understand that they're scrounging around this bathhouse trying to clean everything up, but why are they here? Why are they here?
Yeah, Mu has been, let's say, a pupil of the great Onsen Master, an individual who normally kept these bathhouses together and kind of in harmony for humans and yokai to visit together. The story takes place at a moment where the Onsen Master has disappeared, and so Mu has been tasked with now taking care of bathhouses that have been sort of thrown in disarray. Humans and yokai don't really get along in the same way anymore, and so it's up to them to be able to kind of solve their elements and bring that harmony back to the fantasy island of Izajima.
Thank you so much for that context. That really helps me understand more about the game and the
Sure.
universe. So I would love for you to expand on all the different characters inside of the game, as well as some of the fantastic mechanics that we do see from some of these yokai. Because I know previously you did talk about the kappa and water, the water spirit, basically tossing around water. But
Yeah.
how does that affect the way that Mu works inside of the bathhouse as well? Can you give us a couple of other examples of a couple of other spirits or monsters that may cause some problems for Mu?
Yeah, yeah. To first kind of touch base on the customers will usually just be humans, and they will come with their own kind of normal features. They might enter the onsen, they have an ingredient that they need, and then you solve it. There are some variations on that, like a sort of ruffian character who sort of tumbles into the onsen on their own accord, and you have to address that in a timely manner. But as for the yokai, it kind of takes those mechanics and sets them to the side where yokai are just going to show up in the bathhouse however they please. With the kappa, for example, they're spilling water all over the place. And if you're not careful enough and don't take care of it soon enough, you risk slipping on the water, which becomes a detriment to your time management and focusing on the customers that are also entering. Other yokai that should be visiting, we have a few planned, but one of the ones that I can share today is a yokai by the name of Umibozu, which is essentially a sea monk. But it visits another one of our bathhouse locations, which is a seaside town called Umiguchi. And this one likes to just kind of have a whack-a-mole experience where they pop up in the bath and you have to quickly address them. Otherwise, you can't use that bath for any of your other customers.
That's really awesome. I see. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the customers inside of the game. I am seeing that there are a lot of humans, but they seem to differ in terms of age, sex, gender, and I don't want to say race because they all seem to be inside the same clothing. So it seems to be a little bit difficult for me to tell. But what were the premise of actually creating these characters? Like where are these humans coming from? Why are they coming to the bathhouse?
Yeah. So Izajima has 6 locations, and they're all a little bit, I wouldn't say region based, but they kind of have their own theme in mind. And so each of the customers, when we're completely said and done with the game, will be indicative of the area that you're sort of repairing and facilitating the onsen. And so in the example here, you're seeing some of the local patrons who are familiar with this onsen, which is kind of has a long name by the name of Nakasukuni Onsen. But some of them are older, yes, and if you look closely, you might have to carry those customers, or if you're sort of guiding them along with one hand, it makes Mu move at a slower rate. Whereas some of the younger customers, they will accompany you to any of the baths just fine at the normal speed. Another one of the visitors that I mentioned earlier, the ruffian. They don't really care for lines, so they're just going to walk in. They're going to proceed to whatever bath they want to, and they're going to jump right in. Another facet of them intruding on the onsen is that they dirty the baths a little bit more than what the other customers might, and so you might get a chance to see that as well.
So I want to touch a little bit more about what you stated earlier. I see and I understand that you guys have 6 different stages and areas that you guys have created, and I understand that characters are based upon that specific area. But how did you actually determine what you wanted inside of each area, and how did you determine exactly what you wanted each area to be in terms of difficulty and in terms of surrounding? And in general, I want to use the word aesthetic, understanding
Sure.
that may not be the perfect and adequate word here.
Sure. That I would say it started with trying to figure out what story we were loosely taking the player on, and it starts with giving the players somewhat of an experience where they're mostly addressing human customers at the beginning with this stage, Nakatsukuni Onsen, and as they progress through the other ones like Umiguchi, a few more that we haven't shown to players yet, but they're pretty exciting. You slowly work your way to visiting more and more areas that are predominantly filled with more of these spirits called yokai. all the way up until you reach the end, which is sort of a kind of an immense boss battle, taking on the antagonist to the story by the name of Boss Oni.
That is awesome. So, okay, I'm going to ask this question, understanding completely and totally the answer may be no or it may be yes. Is there a story mode inside of the game? I know that we have single player and multiplayer, but do we also have a story mode? It sounds like there's an overarching story.
Yeah.
There, know a little bit more about that.
There is a story mode. We kept it short and sweet because the player experience is kind of what we're focusing on. For Waking Oni Games, this is our first title, and so we didn't want to scope too large. And so story mode is kind of a pseudo visual novel experience where each onsen is prefaced by a little bit of narrative and talking about the people and the inhabitants that are in the town. That's then followed by another little bit of story before taking the player to another stage.
That's amazing. I'm so excited for that. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's go a little bit more into some of the mechanics inside of the game. And then I want to touch base on some of the other features actually in the overarching game. But I want to talk a little bit about the mixing ingredients. I'm seeing that there's a lot of nuance in terms of what Moo can do here. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, so at the different locations, you have these ingredient bins, and they are supposed to contain the ingredients that match the customer icons. And so you see these different customers entering the bathhouse with an icon above their head as far as what ingredient they need. Your job is to then locate that ingredient in your bathhouse, take it to the mixing station in the center, and then dump it in the bath in any order, either dumping your customer in first, dumping as if like you're lunging them in there, but either tossing in your customer or tossing in your ingredient to help solve the ailment that they entered in with.
How did you determine what types of combinations and what type of ingredients you wanted to allow inside of the game? Because I know earlier you said scope was very important, which I completely understand, especially for independent games. But how did you decide exactly what was important to include inside of the game and which ones you may not have necessarily wanted?
Yeah, that came as it was a design process kind of that started with the ailments had a different representation. So at the time we said to ourselves that the customers were going to have sort of much more emotive ailments. Maybe they're crying, maybe they're angry, maybe they're confused. And we found that was a little hard to communicate given the frame that you're looking at the bathhouse in. And so changing it to ingredients made it a little bit easier, made it a little bit more, not so much color matching, but just identifying, oh, they need this, I'll just go get that for them. And that's essentially what led us to what we have now.
That's amazing. I'm watching the gameplay footage and I absolutely love how simple yet complex the ingredients and combinations makes the game just in general. I play a lot of games that are very similar to this. I don't want to use the word simulation because I feel like that's, an overarching genre, but it's very reminiscent of so many other games that I've played that allow you to just compartmentalize and essentially internalize the acceleration of the gameplay. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's really beautiful. And it's absolutely beautiful to look at. I don't know. Obviously, everyone is looking at this game and they're blown away by the aesthetics of it, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Why don't we go ahead and move on to another feature inside of this game, which I understand you guys have a multiplayer game, multiplayer aspect of it. And I understand that's 2 to 6 players. Is that correct?
It's just 2 players.
Okay, actually, 2 players.
Yep. And so basically in an arcade mode, you can visit the onsen that you've experienced in story mode, and you can then either take that on yourself without having to be interrupted by any narrative, or take that on with a buddy sitting next to you.
Now, was development of multiplayer inside of the specific game always planned? Did you create the game with that in mind?
Yeah, we may not initially started with it. We really wanted to go story heavy, and as we started to scope down, we tried to figure out how can we still give an experience that would be fun. Something that's really important with creating Onsen Master and along with my work at the Japanese Arts Foundation is how can I create an experience that's fun for the entire family, and if only one member of the family is kind of taking part of it, then I guess that it's not really a way that brings everybody else into the couch. And so yes, Onsen Master arcade mode will have a 2-player mode where you and another person can enjoy taking on the onsen together. We're still kind of tweaking some features and testing that out. And so there's still some balancing at play, but that's what we will have for the release.
So an important feature that I also want to bring out and point to inside of the game as it is right now is that I see that you guys are working on adding both Xbox and PlayStation support. Is that correct?
Yes, we are working towards releasing.
I apologize. Controller support was what I meant to say, specifically Xbox and PlayStation controller support, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, as long as the controllers can work natively at a computer, it should be able to support it.
With that as well in mind in general when you're creating the game in terms of just accessibility, because I know that typically what we have is a much younger audience that absolutely loves using controllers, and
Yeah.
they touch a controller and they're like, I'm playing this game on it. Did you have a specific concern regarding just in general accessibility for a younger audience as well when playing this game?
Yeah, it comes first, along with wanting to make the game family friendly, also making it as approachable as we can. Designing games, I really stand by the idea that if it's approachable by a younger audience, then the whole family can be brought into it. And so that's equally important with the controls that we have. I wanted the controls to be simple yet approachable for somebody of any age. And if they really wanted to get a little bit more nuanced with it, it can accommodate it to a degree, but it's not, these multi-button configurations that you have to worry about.
That is huge. And that's something that I think a lot of developers would also do well to notate as well inside of their games. Were there any specific problems that you felt were really, really difficult in the development process? I know multiple times you've stated that you guys really wanted to scale down, which is a fantastic, once again, I really want to stress that, a fantastic viewpoint for any independent game developer to have. But was there anything that you guys saw that you guys specifically wanted to approach that you may not have necessarily been able to do just due to that scaling?
Yeah, all the time. Onsen Master started out as a lofty dream of wanting to create some expanded RPG experience. You're running around kind of behind Moo in the third person and doing any variation of, systems management, ingredient gathering before having to mix it. All of those were at the start of the ideas that were on the table. And, it was very easy to kind of look at the scope of that and realize that if this was our first title, it would take much more than just a few years to complete if that's what we were trying to do, let alone with a very limited budget, primarily comprised of, what's in our wallets. So cutting those things and kind of trimming things down still gave us the experience that we have now, while at least being able to inject some of those things that we were really passionate about at the beginning.
I understand as well that you are the founder and designer of this game on the team. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about what was the most fun for you to design inside of the game, be it a mechanic or just a general visual aesthetic inside of the game?
Yeah, as an artist, art is my background. 3D modeling, illustration, and for me, it's always aesthetic first and always visual first. And so, one of my favorite movies happens to be a Ghibli film, Spirited Away, and I think saying that kind of makes everything a little bit more obvious. But visually, Spirited Away is an incredibly stunning film for me, and I was hoping that at least in an indie sense, I could bring these different onsen locations and hope to create something that's a bit as awe-striking as some of the locations that you see in a Ghibli film.
Oh, I definitely get those vibes from this 100%. I love it so much. Okay. I'm gonna go and delve a little bit into that, and then we'll go back into the game. But I absolutely have to ask, what from the actual movie did you try to take anything from the movie and give any Easter eggs or callbacks to it inside of the game? Because it's such a love note,
Yeah. While they're not visible in the stages that you see here, there are certainly some nods to Spirited Away. It wouldn't be the game that it is without that movie existing. And so, yes, it does start with, while Spirited Away is also dealing with the bathhouse, Onsen is much the same. But those they're going to be there. That's what I'm getting at. And most importantly, the different spirits that visit in Spirited Away is also kind of a key feature in Onsen Master.
Completely understandable and fair. Really excited to hear more about it. Why don't we go ahead and touch base some more on some of the other features inside of the game? I know that we talked a lot about the story and we talked a lot about the single player and the arcade mode, but I want to delve a little bit more into things that specifically happen inside of the arcade mode that may not happen inside of story mode or multiplayer. What is the objective specifically inside of arcade mode?
Arcade mode is really just taking on the onsen together and tackling the different customers. There will be a little bit more of a challenge aspect to it, where it's kind of not necessarily achievement based, but maybe it's how many customers can you address within a given time period, or maybe it's competing against your neighbor as far as who can address the highest amount of customers. Those are the current mechanics that when I touched on what we're kind of exploring and balancing, that's what we're looking at right now.
That's fantastic. I'm going to be very honest. I absolutely love this game, from the way that it looks to the way that it plays. I love the lore behind it, and even more, I just love the call of attention that you seem to have inside of every single interaction when the player is actually able to touch every single one of the characters, because it actually looks like when they touch some of the customers and move them into the bathhouses, the customers are almost like there's like a little bit of sigh and relieving, so you almost feel this little bit of positivity, like, hey, I helped, I did something.
That's
I
great.
love that. Let me ask, do you have a favorite currently public yokai inside of the game?
Ah, public. Only because public. I don't.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
I do love the Kappa. The story behind Kappa is
Mhm.
really bizarre. I would encourage people to go read about them. They like to do a funny thing involving wrestling moves. But that one, honestly, I think all of them share a small spot of interest for me. But as far as my most favorite one, you haven't seen it yet.
Okay, okay, that's fair. I'm not gonna have you tell anything too compromising today inside of this interview. One of the things I do want to talk about is I understand that this game is going to be available later this holiday season. Is that correct? Very possibly early 2021.
That's right. Right around that winter time is when we're gearing for Onsen's release, and you can look forward to it on PC and console. More details of that are going to be rolling out the rest of this year.
Oh, that's fantastic. So excited to hear. And if I understand you correctly, you stated that this was actually the very first game that your studio has created. Is that correct as well?
Yes. Yeah. Waking Oni Games' first title is Onsen Master. We all do have and share backgrounds in game development, having worked on other things, either full time or freelance. But as far as Waking Oni Games is considered, Onsen Master is the first one.
Tell us a little bit more about the development process. At what point did you understand that, I know scaling back has been huge, and I know we've talked a lot about it, and I know you had huge, lofty goals. But I want to talk a little bit more about the actual development cycle in general, and how long the game was in development before we got to this final point of, hey, we're here. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's polished. Like, I love it. I
Yeah.
just want to hear about your journey here.
Yeah. If I think back, Onsen Master was kind of not to use the napkin in a bar idea, but it was almost quite literally that, having a conversation in more of a party setting and talking about how funny it would be to make a game about bathhouses. I personally have been to bathhouses in Japan, and so I have my own special affinity for them. But Onsen Master started as between myself and two other members in the projects, Tim and Leo, who are hopefully out there watching. And we started prototyping the idea, playing around with what medium we wanted Onsen Master to look, whether that be 2D or 3D. There's some old assets out there that are, in my opinion, really unsightly now. But I want to say, it was maybe 2 years before we said to ourselves, okay, we actually have something, let's move forward with it. And then we started gearing up a version of the game that was not only playable, but really, really just wonderful to look at prior to making our Kickstarter, which we were lucky enough to successfully fund.
Oh, you guys did a Kickstarter for this game. That's fantastic. Have you guys been able, how was that process in general, and how do you feel like it helped or hindered your development cycle?
I would only do a Kickstarter once, and I'm glad that I have that little Xbox achievement or PlayStation trophy to show for that. It took a lot of planning. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of legwork and pre-planning to make sure that not only were we providing a Kickstarter that is indicative of the game that we're trying to create and trust presumably strangers with a title that they've never seen before, but be able to carry them along with other updates, other things that made them feel confident that this is a game that is worth their investment and worth their time. It was without all those backers that Onsen Master would still be on its way. And so, it's always a huge thanks to everybody who has supported the game and continues to support it now. Following up with that, as far as Kickstarter goes, yes, it's hard. It's very hard. And so, unfortunately, I don't have any advice except for plan.
Well, on that note, I'm so happy that you're able to get out of the very difficult environment that we always see when it comes to publicly or crowdsourcing an amazing game such as yourself. And I'm very happy that we were able to see it through to the end of the development cycle. Congratulations on getting to this stage. So excited to see it and hopefully play it later this year. I actually take that back. I am going to play it this year. I am so excited. Yes, no, 100%. This is going on my Steam to-do list as soon as I'm done with this interview. You don't even understand. I have Steam open on one monitor and I have this interview on another, honey. Okay, we ready? All right. But with that, I am going to allow you to go ahead and end this conversation. And we'd absolutely love to see where we can follow the remainder of the development process and where we can keep up to date on everything that Waking Oni Games has, hopefully in the future in terms of projects. Where can we find you guys?
Yeah, if you want to follow up on just Onsen Master things, just Waking Oni dev related things, that's waking, like waking up in the morning, Waking Oni Games on social media. And as for myself, and we also have a Steam page, so please wishlist that on Steam if you can. And as for myself, I like to stream game development on my own Twitch channel, as well as talk about those kinds of things on my own Twitter, which is just Waking Oni, no games included.
Well, thank you so much again, Derrick Fields, for showcasing Onsen Master for us today. It was an absolutely pleasure speaking with you today, and trust and believe that game is on my wish list. I am ready. You have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks. I'm so happy to talk about it. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody, that's going to go ahead and do it for this interview, but don't worry, stay tuned. We have even more. And once again, I'd absolutely love to thank all of our fantastic sponsors for making this possible, especially Electronic Games, as well as Prime Gaming and Nintendo, as well as Unity Technology. Thank you so much, guys. Stay tuned. We have even more fantastic independently made games for you here at Game Developers of Color Expo 2020. I'm Sharpie, and I'll be right back.